Hey everybody, today we're reading Poison Apples, Poison Worms. That afternoon in class, Jilson lectured on the national economy. She also spoke about education, crime, the environment, war, taxes, insurance, health and medicine, the justice system, and fruit. You see, Jilson said near the end of the lesson, all these terrible problems are the result of one thing: bad government. Don't get me wrong, government is a good thing. Without government, you can solve none of the world's horrible problems unless you have a bad government, in which case the problems only get more horrible. Sadly, all the world's governments are bad ones. Like a poison apple, here Rainie's ears perked up. Our governments look beautiful, shiny, and wholesome from a distance. But once you've partaken of them, they prove quite deadly. What's more, they shelter more than one wicked official, like poison worms in that poison apple. Poison apples, poison worms, Rainie thought. That was another hidden message phrase they'd heard through Mr. Benedict's receiver. He wasn't surprised. He knew the classes were connected to the hidden messages. But he did wonder exactly how it all fit together. He felt sure he could figure it out, if only. Without warning, Rainie's mood shifted. His optimism drained away, and he was suddenly angry with Jilson. Stupid, lecturesome Jilson. And not just Jilson either, but really, he was angry with just about everybody he could think of. It was an unusual feeling for Rainie, and very distressing. He felt as though the walls were pressing in on him, as though he wanted to get up and run from the room. He felt like yelling and kicking things, preferably Jilson. What was going on? Was the pressure finally getting to him? Completely frazzled, Rainie laid down his pencil and glanced over at Sticky, who was glaring at his quiz as if he wanted to tear it up and toss it into a fire. Oh no, Rainie thought, he's bungled it somewhere. For a moment he felt mad at Sticky too, but then Sticky, catching his eye, nodded as usual and gave a feeble thumbs up. It wasn't the quiz then, and now Sticky was staring at Rainie with a concerned expression, which was how Rainie realized he was scowling himself. He looked over at Kate and Constance. Both had their heads in their hands and looked ready to scream, and yet none of the other students seemed affected in the least. So why would only the four of them? Martina's poisoned us, Rainie thought. He was immediately convinced of it. Martina had slipped something into their lunches. Perhaps she'd ordered the helpers to do it. All his anger now flowed in Martina's direction. When class was finally over, it took Rainie several seconds to realize why the other students were getting up and leaving. Jilson was staring at him and his friends as if they were a bunch of lunatics. I said go, she barked. Or do you want to stay here all day? The four of them bolted from their desks. They needed an emergency meeting. Most students were headed to the gym to play games before supper, and Mr. Curtin was not in his favorite spot. The plaza was deserted. The children crossed to the farthest corner, made sure no one was in earshot, and all began talking at once. Are you feeling what I'm feeling? Rainie asked. What's this all about? Kate said. So you feel it too? I think my head's going to split open, Sticky said. My first thought was that Martina poisoned us, Rainie said. But poison? Kate said. No, I don't think so. This is all in my head. Rainie and Sticky agreed. It wasn't a physical problem exactly. It was something else. But then what was it? The three of them began comparing their symptoms. Only Constance said nothing. She listened as the others talked about how irritable and angry they felt, as if they were engaged in a furious argument. And as they spoke, she seemed to be shrinking. It was Rainie who noticed this, that Constance, with a look of anxious bafflement, had begun to crouch down as if to protect herself from an attack. Constance, what is it? Rainie asked, his brow wrinkling with concern. What's wrong? That's all. Constance asked in a weak voice. You just feel kind of annoyed? Extremely annoyed, Kate said. Really, I've never felt so cranky in my life. So you don't hear, Constance trailed off. She didn't have to finish. Rainie couldn't believe they hadn't thought of it right away. The experience must have rattled every bit of sense out of all their heads. Hadn't Mr. Benedict specifically predicted this? Most of us will feel irritable and confused, Mr. Benedict had said. Essentially the way we feel now whenever the television is on and the messages are being broadcast. Mr. Curtin's boosting the power, Rainie said gravely, and when Kate and Sticky looked at him, still not comprehending, he said, It's the hidden messages. Our minds are reacting to them. Sticky gasped. Kate slapped her forehead. Of course! The hidden messages had begun to transmit directly into their minds. No more need for television, radios, or anything else. All the other students were undisturbed because, just as Mr. Benedict had said, only minds with an unusually powerful love of truth noticed anything was happening. So we can't avoid them anymore? Kate said. Well, that's depressing. I think there's more, Rainey said. He knelt beside Constance and put his hand on her shoulder, and Constance, for once, didn't complain. There is more, isn't there, Constance? Kate and Sticky looked from Rainey to Constance, who was nodding and hiding her face behind her hands. She actually seemed to be fighting back tears. All of their minds were resisting the hidden messages, but Constance, and only Constance, could hear the messenger's voice. In rare cases, with exceptionally sensitive minds, Mr. Benedict had said, and here was such a case, such a mind, Constance Contraire. The development shocked them all, especially Constance, who was so disturbed by it she spent the evening with her head under her pillow. She was no better by the time Kate smuggled her into the boys' room for their meeting. It might be useful, you know, Sticky whispered, trying to cheer up, a way to gauge Mr. Curtin's progress. On a really, really awful day, one of us might not be able to tell the difference between a normal bad mood and a hidden message mood. But if you can hear the actual voices, well then you're like our canary in the coal mine. A canary in a coal mine? Constance mumbled without looking up. Sticky failed to notice Rainey's warning look. Oh yes, miners used to bring canaries with them to gauge oxygen levels in the mine. If the canary died, they knew the oxygen was running out and they'd better get out of there. If the canary died? Constance repeated. Sticky looked suddenly regretful. That was perhaps an unfortunate comparison, Rainey said. The point is you're important, Kate said. Okay? I already knew that, Constance snapped. I didn't need all this mumbo-jumbo in my head to tell me, and I definitely didn't need Martina Crow in there whispering it. She was one doing the last message, in case you're wondering. I dislike her enough outside my head, much less inside it. In fact, I think I'll write an insulting poem about her, although, come to think of it, Martina makes for a tricky rhyme. Rainey, Kate, and Sticky glanced at one another with cautious optimism. Constance seemed to be feeling a little better. They all were, actually. They had spent the evening adjusting to the hidden message broadcast. There had been 3 more since Jillson's class, trying not to snarl at one another or smash their fists on desktops or slam drawers. Studying had been positively excruciating, like trying to read while someone bangs out an annoying tune on a piano, and with fingers on the wrong keys at that. But an hour had passed since the last broadcast, and the children's moods had improved, which helped them focus on the fact that their situation, unfortunately, had not. The thing to come was getting closer. Mr. Curtin was not broadcasting his messages at full power yet. Otherwise, all 4 of them would hear voices, not just Constance. But matters had obviously worsened, and the children had only just arrived on the island. Were they already too late? What should they do? Coast is clear, Sticky said when he'd climbed onto the television and looked out the window. He took the flashlight from Kate. What should I say? Mr. Benedict will already know the messages are stronger, Rainey reflected. He and the others are surely feeling it too. Just tell him that Constance is hearing voices. He hadn't expected that. Got it, Sticky said, turning to the window. Constance hearing voices. Here goes. But don't use her real name, Rainey warned. Oh, right, Sticky said sheepishly. Of course not. Are you just trying to get me caught, George Washington? Constance grumped. Sorry, Sticky said, gritting his teeth as he always did when Constance used his full name. I'll just say, he looked to the others for help. Rainey glanced at Constance, who was scowling impressively, ready to complain about whatever they suggested. Resisting the first thing that came to mind, Rainey suggested they refer to her as the smallest one. Constance grudgingly accepted this, and soon Sticky had sent the message. A few minutes later, he received a response from the mainland. Time is shorter than we thought, thus to get what must be got, you must become what you are not. It sounds like he wants us to put a rush on things, said Sticky, climbing down from the television. Fine by me, said Kate, but how exactly? What does he mean, what must be got? Whatever it is, we have to become something different to get it, Rainey said. What could that be? Constance said. They all looked at one another. None of them had any idea. They didn't even know where to start. Have a good day.